Thank you for inviting me to speak on AI ethics and performance, applying AI for sustainable growth advantage. I'm Dr. Cindy Gordon. I'm the CEO of Sales Choice, and I'm the recipient of the 2018 Digital Transformation Award for Disruptive AI. First, anyone listening would recognize that AI is absolutely big business. The market's valued at over $93 billion, and it's projected to expand at a compound annual growth rate of over 38%. And depending on the report you read, sometimes you'll even see that the growth rate is between 48 and 56%. Forbes, where I actually am a thought leader, and I contribute a column on a weekly basis on AI and how it can be applied to improving board governance practices and giving CEOs insights on what they can do to take advantage of AI. The Forbes Insight survey that was done not too long ago looked at a number of respondents, and their feedback was that the value for AI can come in many dimensions, but these are sort of the top four parameters that often come up in the research surveys. First, 40% opportunities in increasing productivity, 30% roughly in reducing operating costs, improving the speed to market by over 20%, and I think most significantly, an opportunity to relook at your business model and look at it, exploring how you can possibly change it or transform it into a new business model. Obviously, the topic of this that you've asked me to speak about is to look at not just what AI is, tell a few case studies, but look at more deeply the AI ethics lens. I'm an adjunct professor at George Brown College and also an AI ethics board advisor at the University of Arizona as part of the Forbes Business and Technology School. So I've been immersed in looking at AI and ethics for quite some time. First, I think it's important to define AI ethics. It's a system of moral principles and techniques that are intended to inform the development and the responsible use of AI. More recently, the Pew Research Institute examined some of the key perspectives of where people are in regards to employing ethical principles. They found that over nearly 70% chose the option that ethical principles will not be employed in most AI systems by 2030. I found that statistic very disturbing. In other words, many people are building models using AI, but not thinking through the moral implications or the societal implications. So we do have some work to do as a technology leadership community. If you net out all of the sort of worries and hopes, it kind of comes in a couple of streams. First, the main developers of AI are very focused on profit-seeking ventures, and there right now is no legal global consensus about what ethical AI might look like. So there's a lot of work to do on the legal front. In terms of the hope side, obviously AI shows incredible promising value in terms of societies and ways that can mitigate our problems arising from technological evolution. When you look at the area of AI ethics, there's usually the big four that stand out in terms of the ones you really need to think through. Obviously, in the time that I have with you today, I can't cover them all in detail, but I am going to talk about particularly data bias in terms of ensuring inclusion and diversity, and I'm also going to talk about privacy in relationship to trust and transparency, and particularly bring in the point of view of surveillance capitalism. We spent 3 years, my partner, Malay Upadhyay, and I, doing global research. And as you can see, there's 3 books that have been published. The AI Dilemma is one that we co-authored. The other 2 were the work of Malay Upadhyay and all of his efforts in pioneering in AI. Through the journey, we learned that there isn't one industry that cannot be possibly disrupted through AI. So it's not a singular solution. It's a technology that can apply to pretty well any profit center or not-for-profit center. Some of the kinds of things that you see every day, obviously, if you've got a Google Nest or you've got other products in your home, you can speak to those products and those products can answer your questions, can handle our customer call inquiries, diagnosing all kinds of medical issues or challenges, even predicting credit card risk well before the risks happen. Driverless cars are obviously going mainstream. We will continue to see that kind of innovation. Lots of focus even on playing music, inventing music, painting, rewriting our email communication. So here, are just some of the examples of where AI is applied everywhere. I want to take the opportunity to share a little bit of our story and what we've learned in terms of applying sustainable AI, particularly in the sales industry. So, first point is we only work, my company, in B2B large enterprises. 30% of those B2B companies will be employing AI to augment at least one of their primary sales processes by 2025. Just like we saw in advancing AI into marketing enablement, we're seeing the same thing now in sales. We've been on a journey pioneering. We've got a platform that is a very robust AI insight engine that not only looks at identifying the leads and prioritizing them for you, prioritizing your opportunities, getting to levels of 90% in terms of predictive accuracy on your forecast, but also moving upstream to relationship intelligence. And our newest edition is actually looking at correlations of mood into driving a business advantage. We all know happy, motivated employees drive higher results in sales. Just a quick snapshot of some of what our clients are saying. You can see here Jeff Green from Purolator, where they're using our software across all of the sales practices for small, mid, and large enterprises, and how they have benefited as a result of our forecasting. RL Datix, a very significant company in Ottawa, now has a global footprint. They use us every single day, and if they don't feel that they're getting the right input, they're relying on the AI to actually revalidate whether they will include an opportunity in a forecast or not. And we're getting to levels in these accounts in some areas of 85 to 95% accuracy on different sales cycles. We've won a lot of awards, and I think a lot of the awards are a result of our position on ethical AI, and particularly transparent AI. I'm underscoring this point because there's a lot of solutions in the market that are black box AI, where you get a prediction, you get a perspective, and then humans act on it. But do you really understand what the underpinnings are? Do you really understand the data and maybe the methods that are applied, and also the data sets that are being used? So our position is that we are 100% transparent in our methods. We even have an audit trail. We're not believers in black box AI, and we really caution technology leaders to really understand the implications of not having a line of sight to really strong, responsible AI practices. We step back a little bit and we look at companies perhaps like Google, right? And we're absolutely big users of Google technology at my company. But let's step back a little bit and think, Google knows where we are. They know the context of our activities, who we're with. Maybe 5 years from now, the technology will not only know everything that I've just said, but also our health, even predict when we'll likely die if it's by natural causes, and also down the line. Will AI help by warning us of a cancer likelihood so we can get some help? Or will an employer have that predictive insight across their employee base and be able to make some changes before the risks become an operational expense? So imagine that you've got a health index across all your employees and all their medical issues, and predict the odds of when their situations will move to another decision making. And so, will we enable AI for good, or will AI in business start to be used for bad behaviors? There's no one that's been more vocal on some of these topics on AI data bias than Dr. Kathy O'Neill in her Weapons of Mass Destruction, and also the recent book that was written on invisible women by Carolyn Chirado Perez. The fundamental assumption here is really threefold. First point, there's actual bias in the mathematical algorithms. Second point, about 80% of the data sets that are being used for predictive modeling, particularly in image processing for facial recognition, are mathematically flawed. As a matter of fact, we can't tell the difference often between a black person versus a white person is very easily identified, and having false positives are very, very low when it comes to identifying white males, but very high in terms of recognizing females. Let's move to surveillance capitalism. I don't think there's a day that goes by when I'm not monitoring something that's going on in China, and I have been following their developments and their incredible growth over the last 10 years when they indicated that AI would underlie, essentially it's like the water system, every single business, every single process. And they have declared that they will be the leader worldwide in cyber sovereignty. However, what are the implications here when you start moving into solution sets like SenseTime? SenseTime went public. They're one of the top fifth largest IPO, and that went public about 4 years ago. They're valued at over 20 billion at this point in time. And what do they do? Well, essentially, you can see on this slide, they have a panoramic camera. It's got 8 different lenses, and they're positioned all over the airports, all over the subways, all over the main residential areas, the main shopping areas, also integrated into Honda vehicles. So essentially, the data is being amassed on every single person, maybe where you walk, where you eat, what you do. Think about amassing everything. It was almost like watching the movie Minority Report, where everything comes together. And it's all driven from facial technologies and image recognition, and also correlating other data sets that they have on you. Do we have permission to collect all that data? The individual is not part of the conversation, or the implications and risks and how that data is being used. There's another development that's becoming more significant and very real, maybe not as much in North America, but definitely within Asia. We have a rise of synthetic robots and non-human relationships and deeper ethical considerations to think about. Samsung, although they're from South Korea, they recently announced, I think it was about 5 years ago, Neon. It's amazing how many people in North America aren't aware of Neon and what Neon is going to do. Essentially, these are digital avatars, artificially human avatars. I can create a visual avatar that almost looks and sounds like me, has my freckles, even position, but moves like I do, etc. So we're moving into a world, and obviously when you look at the metaverse, where we will have avatars that look like humans in the actual virtual spaces. But that's not the only dynamic here that's happening. The other one is actually physical robots that are being synthetically developed, who will also stand beside us, work beside us, etc. What are the ethical implications there in terms of the loss of jobs, or the world that we want to create, or even the world we want to interact with? We now have a rise of men even marrying robots. As a matter of fact, when I did my research preparing for this, there were over 100,000 applications in China currently for people looking for legal sanction to marry their robots. Now, obviously, these commercial licenses aren't necessarily fully ratified by government legislators, but over the next 20 years, this will become more commonplace. And so just like we've had to fight for different rights, do anticipate that this is an area that's on the rise. Now, what's driving this? Well, what's driving this behavior is also because of the increased factors of human loneliness. It's actually at an all-time high. It's actually increased by over 30% over the last 10 years. Now let's take another perspective. Let's just step back and look at the US Army new drone swarms. This isn't fiction. This is reality. These are visualizations of products that are being tested. Now, extrapolate this a little bit further and know that most of the technology in these drones can actually be commercially and easily purchased. So as homeowners, we could actually build these ourselves. Well, what are the implications of students getting together that are angry, creating mass opportunities of drones, and having them swarm into the public school systems, all remotely working from their home computers or another location? So we are going into a period where drone technology is going to actually we'll start to see terrorist attacks. They haven't come yet with drone technology, but rest assured they are on the horizon. So you might be wondering why I'm raising some of these ethical questions. That's because leaders need to get out front. They need to look beyond the 12 months or the next 12 months or the next 24 months. They have to start looking strategically about the world that we're all co-creating together, and also thinking hard about the world that we want to leave for our children. Now, to turn the tables, because my objective was not to rain down on this wonderful conference that you're all having, I wanted just to be you to be strategically aware of some of the dimensions as technology leaders that you do need to have be on the lookout for. But there's a lot of positive things that are happening now. First, there's the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI. They released a recent AI index report. The IEEE, which has always been governing and providing good standards to help guide our corporations, they have set their focus on releasing AI standards and even AI certifications in terms of ethical and responsible practices. The education is critical. The US National Security Commission on AI has basically done a tremendous job of identifying malign uses of AI and even banning significant players like SenseTime that I mentioned in terms of facial recognition not to be allowed into North America. Canada has been always very progressive on the AI stage. We have over 13 AI policy initiatives. I encourage you to learn and read about what Canada is doing in this area, because obviously that's at least my home country. In terms of where the leadership is on the legal side, I would point you to the European Commission proposal for regulation, which have been laying down harmonized rules, and it's a major step forward. And those particular practices, once legalized, will cascade over to the North American legal context, because we are looking for unifying legal standards across the globe. It's taking time, but the good news is that they are coming. Now, one of those principles is a very significant ethical principle, and that is, I as a human have the right to be unknown. And you have to have my permission to do anything. And I have the right to basically remove any footprint of me at any point in time. So how we implement those protection, privacy rules is a whole other perspective. But I just want to highlight that those are some of the ideas that are being discussed at this point in time. When you step back and you want to think about building a sustainable AI strategy, I think the very first premise is you need digital literacy. If I took the board of directors of your company or all your leadership team and I gave you a white sheet of paper and I asked you to define AI, and then I asked you to define machine learning, then I asked you to define an algorithm, I might get different answers. It's very important that we upgrade the skills and knowledge of our leaders across our organizations, because I'd mentioned at the beginning, AI is underlying everything. It's much like we had to learn in terms of the applications of personal computers and how to work through how to use PowerPoint, how to use Excel. We now need to understand the language of artificial intelligence. We don't have to necessarily be the programmer, but we certainly need to manage the life cycle and understand how important it is. The second imperative is to build ethical AI foundations into your operational practices. I had the pleasure of interviewing two senior VPs from Bank of Nova Scotia yesterday, and we talked a lot about how their life cycle model has brought in ethical foundations right from the get-go. So they have a very comprehensive ethical list to determine whether or not you will even be able to go to step 2. So think of ethical foundations as your screen. Is AI going to be used for good or for harm? And does it meet all of our ethical criteria? Have that risk assessment, do it up front. But at the same time, you've got to follow that the development practices continue as teams evolve and resources evolve as you move through the life cycle of building an application. The other thing is I seeing a lot of good consolidation of integrating functions for data analytics, AI, and risk into a unified operating model. I can't underscore the importance to bring these groups, operating groups together and not to have silos. And same thing with the creative visual designers. Bringing those into the equation is so important. In some banks that I've spoken to recently, 80% of their AI models never make it into sustainability and production. The fourth area is to ensure that we're developing our talent. There is nothing more difficult these days to attract really accomplished data scientists. So you need to attract them, develop, retain them. They need to have the fundamental toolkits so that they're growing and exploring. And most importantly, the AI projects that you're advancing really need to be demonstrating that they're for good, and you're calibrating the value right up front and then following that journey through the life cycle. So these are sort of 5 fundamental principles that we look to in terms of companies building sustainable AI strategies. In terms of ways that we help our clients get AI right, I think you've already noted that we've built an AI award-winning software as a service platform for sales professionals. But we've also moved beyond just sales professionals in the sense that we're now helping our clients build robust business strategies. We're guiding AI and ML foundations. We have a very rich set of educational materials to train C-levels. Probably trained over 500 senior executives on AI since we started our company. And now we're really expanding and building robust AI ethical models to really help ensure that our clients build value. We've learned so much in our journey, and a lot of this has also been possible from the leadership and support of Fawn Annan, the CEO of IT World Canada, and her continued stewardship to profile entrepreneurs who are working very, very hard in advancing the field of ethical AI. So I really want to say thank you, Fawn. In closing, AI ethics and performance, if you have to really wrap it up in a nutshell, I think you have to strive for balance. Leadership in AI is all about achieving the optimal balance and ensuring you are integrating deeply responsible AI for good throughout your continued AI journey. It needs to be top of mind. You need to build it into your cultural DNA. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. If you'd like to learn more about our company, I just will indicate that we have a lot of rich material on AI in our YouTube channel, in our video channels. So we're always sharing our knowledge to help you grow. I encourage you to follow my Forbes AI channel because it is designed for senior leaders. And I think there's content in there that can help you as well as educate your employees and your talent. So thank you very much for having me with you today. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your conference on disruptive innovation and digital transformation. Thank you so much.